I'm here today to talk about the train at Pinafore Park and how it became about. So my wife and I were on holidays at the time. We were way up north, and we ran across this miniature railroad. We got looking around, and I got acquired the people, and they said, "Oh, it hasn't run for several years now." And we walked up the track, and we went around the track, and there's a lake there, and the curve was so sharp they had a third rail on there to keep it on the track. I said, "Boy, this is something else." And we went down, and I seen the shed, and I looked in the crack in the door, and I noticed two engines in there. I said, "Wow, we got to go downtown and find out about this." And at the time, my father was just coming 64, and he was going to retire in a little bit. And I thought, "Gee, this would be something he can run this on the weekends. Maybe we'll get something going here." I went down and inquired, and he said, "Oh yeah, it is for sale. The interesting party's got to clean it all up though and take all the track away and take it." Well, I said, "That's what I'd do. I'd take it all away if I bought it." So anyway, we come back to St. Thomas, and we inquired at Sarnia, and they didn't want it, and we inquired at London, and they didn't want it, and we come over to St. Thomas, and they thought it'd be kind of nice to have a train there back in the bush there. They had a place there to run it. So at any rate, I went back to Huntsville, and I made them an offer, and they accepted it. And I said, "Boy, now we got our hands full," and we turned around, and I told a couple of my friends, and Beaver was Belton Lumber at the time. They were going out of business, so I bought an old truck off them. Had a flat bed on the back of it, and so away we went up there, and I took some people with me, and Dad went up at the time who came with me to see what I'd bought, and between the two of us, and so we looked it over, and I said, "Well, the first thing we got to do, the cold weather's come, we got to get these engines back to London." And when I seen another friend of mine in London, he let me put one in his backyard. I had to get him out of there, so he lived away out near Byron, and he let me put it. I said, "That engine we're not using. We're going to use the other one first. It's the one they've been using all the time." And so I said, how are we going to load these engines?" "Well, we got a float." And I said, "Well, get a bulldozer up here. Let somebody that wants one cut a big hole in the ground in front of the door so they can back the thing right underneath. And so we did. They dug it all out, and the next day, we were lucky it froze. It was just like pavement down there. On any other time, says you could never do this any other time of the year. You're so lucky to be here today. Other time that you just go into a soggy mess, and we'd back the truck in, and we'd be done. Now it's all froze hard like pavement. We come back in. We just brought cutting torches with us and what have you. We put some pieces of rail on and made it all one piece of track. And the bulldozer had a winch in the back, and he grabbed a hold of the first engine, and he pulled, and he just got it about halfway out, and we stopped for a minute, walked around. He said, "Gee, this don't look right to me." And the flange was right up on the top of the rail. Why we didn't lose it, I don't know, but we didn't. And I said, "Boy, bring the toe around the other side," and we pulled it the other way back, and it dropped back on the track again, and we're right up slick. And we disconnect the track, and I went with the driver, and away we went back to London, Ontario, to Hobbs. I called the phone, said, "We're coming, get ready." And they had ties all laid out there on the track, and they'd built up a dock so that the track was level. And we got back to London, we backed in there. We pulled it off. We've been there with a car jack, just moved it along and moved it right across on. Then the truck had to go back again and to get the other one, and which was the same routine. We loaded it and we took it to another dock. We had another dock built. So that part was over. Now he says, that part's over. Now we got to start worrying about the coaches. Well, he says, let's take some track up, and we'll worry about the coaches when summertime comes. I says, "Well, all right." So anyway, we got a gang of people together, my family, and some others went up, and we started disconnecting the rail, all the bolts and nuts. I said, "Well, don't cut nothing. We need all the bolts and nuts. We need everything we could get that we could use again." So, "Oh, well, all right." So I paid a man there when we worked there, and he went along at the back, and he got down on his hands and knees and undid all the bolts and laid them down there beside. Then we had to have some way of moving the rail. Well, it was narrow gauge. I could borrow a track, a lorry affair. That wasn't any good to us because it was narrow gauge. I had to go to the wreckers and buy some 2-inch pipe, and I made a lorry, and I got the spindles out of an automobile there, 4 spindles, and we put the spindles all out, and we bolted the wheels onto those spindles, or welded them on, I can't remember now, but it was just a short little thing, and we went up the track with this outfit, and we picked the rails up one at a time, and just loaded them on there and come along. And then it was downhill. Then I said, now we got a problem. They start down the hill, we'll never get them stopped. They'll go right into the lake. So I said, well, we put a long 2x4, one man on one rail and one another, and we put it down onto the front wheel, onto the back wheel. And I said, now keep that brake on. Don't let it get over a walking speed. Just go along and make sure we're going down that hill. Sure enough, the sucker got away, and we'd made 2 or 3 trips, and then, oh, we can do that, we're Washington, and they wanted to. They tried it, but they couldn't do it, and away it went down there and hit the pile of rail and just bent them in a U right around the front of the motor car. It was unreal. You couldn't believe it. You hadn't seen it. Well, they were mad. They were disappointed that they'd done that, and I was a little upset. But at any rate, we got, must have been 5 truckloads of rail there. We had a Johnny's maid ran a truck, and one of the fellows on the railroad said he would have a license to drive a truck, and he come up, and then the funny part was I had no way of lifting that rail up onto the truck. Well, there was a lumberyard down the street, and I went down there, and they had a darn old tractor. They said, it's not very good. He says, if you want to borrow it, you can borrow it. So it had a bucket on it. We couldn't lift it up. And so we brought the bucket down, and we found center, and we had a pair of rail clamps to clamp that rail, and we loaded them all onto the truck. So we figured we knew how many rails or how much each one weighed and what a truckload was, and we topped it up and tied it down. And away we went down there. And we got back to St. Thomas, and in the meantime, we'd had a bulldozer there, and he'd been up through the bush where we were going to run this train, and we cleared the brush off, and we drove the truck around there and dropped the rail off on both sides of the truck, so we run along. And so that was all fine and dandy, and we went back and got another load, and then we had to stockpile it just to get it off the property. We had to clean that all up. The black flies were bad. They had netting over our heads trying to keep the black flies off us. It was black fly season now, and that was bad news. But anyway, we tolerated the black flies, and we got the rail all out of there. And all this I'm telling you in 5 minutes, but there's a lot of length of time involved here that can't get into that, or we'd never be here more. But at any rate,
what years are we talking about?
Oh, this was back in the 60s. Very early, maybe even 1959, 60, 61. The man that sold it to us owned a paper down there, but they had a daily paper there at Huntsville, and he owned the Huntsville Times or whatever the heck they called the paper at the time, and so that was okay. We got that all settled on, and now we got the coaches. Well, there was a man named Patience. He just a single truck driver with a single truck, and he moved tanks, and he just specialized in railway equipment. Well, his name was Patience, but he was anything but patient. But at any rate, we went up there, and we started loading these coaches, and we got them loaded. And he didn't know. Well, I don't know. Well, I said, load them wheels and all. Your height won't be. You'll be able to still get under the bridges. So he lifted it up, track, wheel and all, and we put one end on, lifted the other end, and got one coach on. And so that's all he did. That was a load. He had to come back, and we did the same routine at St. Thomas. We had a little track built in the meantime. We did a little ramp, and we were able to run them off down into on the track. We hadn't got a shed up yet, but we knew we had to put a shed up of some kind. You just couldn't leave them out like that. The vandals would just walk away with them. So well, that's a whole other story, but we got a bunch of telephone poles, and we put poles in the ground, and we got a bunch of second-hand 2x6s at a house that they were tearing down. We made a whole big shell around, and big beams across the top, and we had a building in pretty short. And we bought half-inch plywood, tongue and groove, and we put all the sides on. I have pictures here of the building going up and coming down, and I put it up, and I had to take it down 35 years later. There's pictures here of the building. So at any rate, that's pretty much the end of that part of it, except the coaches had to be restored and they weren't bad. And one of the coaches got away on us one time, and we were heading for the lake, and we jumped on, and we were very lucky the handbrake did work, and we got to stop before it went in the lake. And so that was the little car they had never used it very often. And the water tank was up there. We had to clean that all up. There's my pictures here of the water tank, and we had to get all rid of everything. So after that, well, then we're wondering what we're going to do. Now we got to go back, and the engine's back at Hobbs. We've got things kind of cleaned up there. In about a year's time, we had things all cleared up. We went back to Hobbs now. Hobbs Boiler Works. He worked for the CPR, same as I did. He worked as a boiler man in the shop, and he quit his job and opened up his own shop. And he knew who I was. And he said, "Come out, you do all you want to do on them boilers, and when you come to something that takes a licensed man, we'll come out and do all the work, the welding that has to be done with a licensed welder. Well, we'll do that. You go ahead and do all the woodwork." And so we did. We worked away at that and worked away at that, and then the governments come down and they were looking the engines over and looking them over as we went along, and they're shaking their head. But at any rate, we carried on, and we finally got it done, ready to put what they call a cold water test. You fill them right up. There ain't an insert room left in the boiler. Then you pump pressure up in the gauge in the cab. Every time you pump the handle up, the gauge would jump up, and there was no time till you had 200 pounds of cold water pressure pushing against the outside of that boiler, and it showed any leaks or defects was there. So we got all the defects, and finally got the papers, and now it come time we're getting ready now to take it back to St. Thomas. So come Labor Day, I thought, well, now if we can do this for nothing, maybe we can put this in the Labor Day parade, and the truck driver on the. So I don't know, Johnny Mays ran a truck, or somebody can come and bring their truck, and they'll get the advertising, and we'll get our engine moved, and we get all this done for free. So and that's how it turned out, and we had pictures of them in the Labor Day parade, and we had a live steam engine in the Labor Day. We could blow a whistle and the whole bottle of wax. We lit it up, and it was on the truck, and we blew it. We drove it onto the truck, and we drove it off the truck. We got to St. Thomas, and so it was quite a show. Everybody enjoyed the show, and I'm not sure, but I think we got a prize, for a float prize of some kind for that time. And then where do we go from there? Well, now we gotta go back and get the other engines. People want to know their backyard now, and we got to go over there. And I had one coach in my backyard, and they had one in theirs, but that was in the city. And so at any rate, we got to get back to the shop now. When we put the shop out, we didn't know what we were going to do for doors. We knew we had to have big, heavy doors, and we didn't have too much money to put big, fancy doors on. And that just as the time just couldn't be better. They were tearing the shop down in London, and we went over, and they give us the doors. So you want them, take them away. We're only going to burn them. I said, boy, so I got a break there. We got 4 pair of doors at that time, so we took the whole 4 pair and we stockpiled 2 of them and put one on one end. We wanted to go right through the shop. The track at the first beginning, and initially we went right through the shop. When we got organized, got ready to go, and we'd made arrangements with St. Thomas to run, and we started running. They come running. "Oh, God, you're way ahead of us. We're not ready for you." Well, I said, You're way ahead of us. We didn't know indeed you'd be ready that fast ago. We thought it'd be another half a year or so." Well, I said, we're ahead of our time too. But at any rate, they just carry on. And so we didn't have any tickets printed. We weren't ready either. We didn't have any tickets ready, and the people started to come, and we ended up just tearing little pieces of paper off postcards, and we were handing them out for tickets. And at that time, well, we were only charging 15 cents. It was for a child to go for a train ride. And we were going around once, and they were happy with that at the beginning. But then, as time went along, we got like that. They're not on the train long enough, so we're not. That ain't right. So we went around twice. A half-mile drive, they got a mile ride, and everybody was satisfied. Then they could wave at the people going by at the station when they went around the second time, and they thought that was great. So, and we still haven't got a station, so I was still working for the CPR every day at my regular job, and So I was down in Toronto, and they were putting in a subway on the Canadian Pacific Main Line, and they had to put a track way out through the field and build the main line way out through the field while they were putting this subway in. They had to dig it out and do all the construction work and put bridges in. So after it was all done and we were back and we're going up and down the main line, this tower was sitting on 4 posts out there where the man worked the gates and watched the trains. And I said, "The roadman, what are you going to do with that building?" He said, "I don't know." He says, "You wanted to make me an offer." I said, "How about $10? Come on down, give us your $10. I'll give you a certificate to take it away." So we got the old 51 Ford out, the big Ford, we went downtown to Toronto with it. And we backed underneath it, and I had to cut a little groove in each post. It was so close, I got back the truck right underneath it, and we jacked it up, took the post out and lowered it down onto the truck. It was a way overload for the truck. It was, the truck could hardly move. It was just a little 6-cylinder. We went out in the 401, but the 401 was working at the time. Went out in the 401, we dragged along there 15 or 20 miles an hour. We couldn't get it to go any faster. And the Board of Transport stopped me and pulled me in, and they were like, "Oh, we're in trouble now." And at any rate, they thought it was all over for a while. They said, "Well, it's a once in a life. You're not in business. You're just doing something once in a lifetime. We're going to let you go through with it, but just take your time and don't travel at night with it. Just go along and be very cautious." So that's what we did. And we got it there, and then we got to St. Thomas, and we put it down, and then we didn't know how we were going to get it off the truck. We had no idea. And we put some ties down, and we kind of slid it over. Slid it off the truck. It was built so darn well you could drop it and it wouldn't even bend. And we dropped it off the truck, and we turned it around, and it had windows in 3 sides, and we made a nice station out of it. It worked fine. And then as time went along, we realized that we needed someplace to get the people over the rain, and we put a big roof out over it and made it really look nice. And when we were finished, it actually looked like a little station. And we sold souvenirs out of there for the children, and one thing and another, and coffee. And so at any rate, that's how the station got built. And, well, we had a water tank down there. We had a water tank, and it wasn't successful down at the shop. We could have had water down there. So I went and seen the reclaim yard in London there. That's where they were cutting up all their coaches at the time and engines and all. And I liked going over there, looking around, see what they had. There was always full of interesting stuff. And at any rate, I said, "What are all these tank cars in here?" He said, "Oh, yeah, we're cutting them all up." Well, I said, "I'll tell you what I want. I want you to measure how wide it is. If it's 10 feet wide, then I want you cut off for me. 10 feet, I want 10 feet high. And whatever width it is, well, so they cut it off. And then they put it down on one side. No, there. We'll load it for you." And so they loaded it and put it on a truck for me. And away I come to London, and we were creeping through London with this darn big tank in the back of this truck. It was funny. A cop was following me, and some lady pulled over right in front of me. Well, I jammed the brake on, and they got stopped. I thought the cop was going to give me a ticket. He didn't bother me. He went to her, give her help, and I went to St. Thomas. So it worked. It was good. It was a badge, and then one way it was a blessing, and another way to give the cop something to do, and he let me go to St. Thomas. We unloaded that tank, and then on the ground. Then I went back to Hobby Boiler Works, and he had a bunch of great big angler in there. He'd been laying there. I said, "What are you going to do with all the angler? What good is it?" I said, "Well, it's all welded together. You can't do anything with it. You want it, take it out of there." Well, I'm back. I gathered it all up best I could and put it on the truck crossways. We went back to St. Thomas, and we made 4 legs, and we electric welded the wall under that tank. And 2 or 3 people come over, "I don't know, it's going to be pretty heavy. You get it full of water up in the air there." And so an engineer come down, he looked at it, and he said, "That's fine." He said, it's quite strong enough. So anyway, then we had a great big wrecker come in there, and this fella down in St. Thomas, that truck's just about at the end of the road. I said, how can you bring it over and lift that tank up for me? He said, oh yeah. So he come over and he grabbed a hold of it and we lifted it up and we dug 4 big holes in the ground right beside the track, and we put 45-gallon drums down in there, and they put this darn thing down in there. I said, boy, that's pretty nice. That looks pretty good. And the legs were in line with the track, and we lined it all up. And we had a ready mixed concrete come in, and they filled them drums full of cement for us. And I said, no, it can't go away now. He said, you gotta leave it. Oh, he said, we don't care, let it stay. So we left the truck there all night and let the cement set up. And he came back the next day and took his truck away, and I had a nice tank, and he was gone. Well, then the next job we had to figure out how we were going to get the water into it and how we were going to get the water out of it. So we said, well, I guess the first thing it was a long ways over to the water tap, so there was maybe 1,000 feet or better. So I said, well, that's a long way. It's a lot of digging to put a pipe in the ground all the way over to that tank. Well, I thought about it for a while. So then I came up with the idea. We went down, we rented, I don't know whether we rented or a guy loaned it to us. We got a one-horse plow, and we dug it into the ground, and we left from the pavilion. We went right across there with that son of a gun. We pulled it with a tractor and a chain, and right through that pavement, right through the road, right down to the water tank, and took a piece of the track out and crossed under the track. And we put a piece of plastic pipe in there, and we went along with our hands and knees, and we put that back in. You'd hardly know we'd been across there. And we rolled it, and so that brought that. Then we had to build a big square hole down over the pavilion, yeah. And one pipe come in, and one went to their line, and one went to my line, and we got it all fixed up. And I had to put a drain valve in mine so I could drain it out in the winter time. And so we got that all fixed up. Well, now we got water there. I said, what's the next move? We got to figure out how we're going to get it out. And I was out to Dollar Carn, and they were progressing, and they said, we got tank trucks here, and they showed them to me, and they had little flexible things on the back for the hoses to go up and down. And he said, God, that's the chances of getting some of those valves. I'd like to have 2 of them. Oh, he says, we're going to cut them up. Go ahead. So I took them off, and then we run right out of the bottom of the tank, straight out. And we put a big pipe up the side of the tank, straight up and down, and it swiveled on this thing, and we tied it. And we had a pulley off a clothesline pulley with a wire, and we run that wire up and down and back to the back. There's pictures of it here. I don't know whether they can see them on that camera. Here's a picture of the truck coming down over there and the tank, and this is before we got it hooked up. But anyway, there's the little square station back there. Now we got the station in, and we got the water tank. We're starting to almost look like a railroad now. We're getting the water tank up, and everybody thought it was pretty nice. There's 2 pictures of that. There's a picture when it's halfway up, and there's the legs I welded on, and they went down into these drums you see here in the ground. And so at any rate, we finished that all up and got it up and set up. And then there's a pulley. No, the pulley's not there yet. But at any rate, so the engine come up, and we stop, and they just grab that pipe, and you pull it down, take water, and put it back up. Away you go. It was just as authentic as the big main tracks. The difference was, instead of a 2-inch pipe, we used a 10-inch pipe on the railroad. We needed 10,000 gallons as fast as I needed a 500 gallon. So it's just a miniature of what the other ones were. So that kind of, that's how that worked. Well, we were there every year, every weekend for quite a many years. One time a man came to us and says, I'll buy the tickets for a whole day. How much you want? Oh, I said, I don't know. I never done that before. He said, I'll advertise in the paper, my business, and I'll put my name down, and I'll pay for it. So he gave me a flat rate, and we went along with that. I said, at a pouring rain, I said, but this is going to be a madhouse. At any rate, the people lined up in the pouring rain back for half a mile. I said, well, now what do we do? He said, well, just take what you can take. So, at any rate, that big coach, we put 100 people out of the shot, and everybody wasn't too many people. Nobody went home. They all had their ride. But I said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. That don't work. Now, this train ride, as we went along, we had to figure what we were going to do. So people got on the train, and then we left the station and went downhill, and we drifted down till we got down by the shop. We went right by the shop. Then we started uphill. And I deliberately slowed right down to make the engine work to pretty much to its full capacity, that people could enjoy listening to the engine working hard going up the hill. And then we went around the corner, and then we dipped down and went along by Oxford's pond there and around back to the station. And we did that twice for a ride. They had a 1 mile ride out of it, and everybody was happy about that. So that's how we handled to satisfy the people. Well, then one day the engine was going by itself, and I what the heck's wrong here? And we put it in the shop, and we opened the front up, and we found the dry pipe, which is a pipe comes down. The steam dome sits in the center of the boiler. That's in the center because the water tips forward when you go up a hill, and it switches forward when you go down a hill. So in order for the water to tip back and forth, they put it right dead center, so that it's out of the water at all times. It's called a dry pipe, but the water does get into it. So at any rate, it sprung a leak, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a big deal. And we had to take the whole heading all out, and I had to take that dry pipe all out. And I went up to a place uptown, and the guy looked at it, and he says, I know what that is. It's a dry pipe out of a steam engine. I said, how'd you know that? He said, well, I worked in the shop for a few years there when it was steam engine. I said, well, I said, oh, now you know what it is. Tell me how to make me a new one. So he said, yeah. He said, let me look at it. He looked at it. He said, it's just a straight piece of pipe. It shouldn't be any problem. But the ends were big, heavy castings. They wouldn't break, but the pipe was shot. So that was quite an undertaking. It took us 2 or 3 weeks to do that time. I still had to follow my job in the CPR, and we worked on that on days off. And for help, well, students come around that were interested in the steam. Some couldn't care less, and other ones really did take an interest in it. And they asked me if can I work in the steam engine with you? I said, sure, I want that you work in the steam engine. I'll show you how to do some of this stuff. Well, so that worked out good. It was fine. They were volunteers, and there was only the odd one that would give you any trouble. Most of the time, they were willing to help you, and I thought it was great. And even some other people who were pensioned off come over and help, but the students were good. I liked that. I had students all the time. They never worked in their life, never picked a tool up, and I told them what the tools were, how to work them, and they enjoyed that. So that's how I got around them. Well, then the tires wear out. The steam engines have a tire on them. It's similar to a car, but they're solid steel. And then the flange is cut on the corners. There are only 4 wheels underneath there, and that flange, it cuts on those corners. And they got to a point where they were getting to a point where we were getting scared of them. So I said, well, we got to heat the tire. You get this tire red hot or close to it, and it'll come off. So, but then that's only the beginning. You got to drive. We had to build a pit in the shop. We had to make a cement pit big enough for that wheel to fit in. It had to go out beyond the wheels, where the crank on the end of the wheel had to go by. Yeah, and we had to put short little piece of rail in there. There was on both sides of the cement, and each side we had to cut all the rail, couple it up again. So we did that, and we had it just didn't take place in 5 minutes. We had to build a cement pit. It had to be deep enough for those wheels to fit in. So then we had to build a little dolly buggy for the engine to sit out on the pilot to push it off, just straight back and forth, not to drive on the track, just to get it off the pit. So we put a chain around the boiler, and we grabbed both wheels, and we lowered it down nice and easy. After we come in, we lifted it up, took the rail out from under it, put the dolly buggy in the front, lowered the wheel down into the hole, put the rail back in, and pushed the engine on the dolly buggy over that off the track, took the rail out, then we could lift the wheel out, put it on a truck, and take it, and we had to build a cement, I built a pit out of steel, made a ring, go around the tire, and coal oil, I seen them do it on the CBR, they did the same on the big engine CBR, that's where I got, that wasn't me, that was where I got the idea from, how to do it. Turn that on, put air on, you got a nice flame going on, like a blowtorch, and drilled holes all the way around it, and the tire would just come right off. It fell right off as soon as you got it hot. Then I found we found this place way down in the States called Jedgewater Steel, and all they do is railroad wheels. Anything you got in the wheels, they do it. And I called them, they said, oh yeah, you bring the wheels down, we'll make you a new set of tires. So you bring the old ones down, and we loaded them on the old truck, and we went away down there and took them and left them there. And they says, come on back. And so we left them there. They called a week or so later, so come on back and get them. And we got down there, and we got them loaded on, and they kept the old ones. And we come up, and we got to the border, and we pulled through. And much to my surprise, the customs guy came out and he looked in there. He said, "We steam engine tires." I said, "How'd you know that?" Well, he said, I was around rail enough to know a tire when I see one. And well, he said, "What are you going to do now?" "Where's the paperwork for it?" I said, "I got no paperwork here. I got a bill of sales, all I got." "Well, you got to do this and you got to do that." And so they made me unload them. They had to say, take them around to the warehouse and leave them here and go home in the truck. And so we lift them up. So all we could do is lift them up and roll them off and they had a Dewey there in their shop, and they put them away. And they called me about a week later and says, "Okay, come on down and get them." And we went back. This was down in Niagara Falls. And went back and got them. But then we got home, then we had to put them on. Well, I had contacts at the technical school in London. They'd make me whatever I wanted to make. So we figured out, we drilled the inside of the wheels and threaded them, and then we made a little steel bracket. I might have them around yet someplace. And they bolted them on, and we stood the wheels on their end, and we got them hot, put them on, set them up top, got them hot, and they dropped right on. They fell right on, and they hit them. They hit these brackets I'd put on there, and that's what held them exactly where we wanted them. And then 2 seconds later, they'd grabbed that wheel, and there was no way you're going to move them again. So we turned it over, and then we went through that whole process for the whole 4 wheels. And we had 4 new tires in there before we were done. And in the meantime, when the whole wheel got hot, when that hot tire got on that cold, then put the wheel on ice if you could. It had to be as cold as you could, and the wheel as hot as you could, and the two come together. And when they come together, the whole wheel was hot. We took big files and we filed the wheels, and they looked so nice. And we were done. We were able to get all the rough castings all cleaned up. But at any rate, that's one of the obstacles we ran into was the tires on the steam engine. And we were glad to get that done, and we were proud of ourselves. And the students thought it was great. And so now we got an engine. Now it's got a new dry pipe. It's got 4 new wheels. In the meantime, we had the other engine ordered, and we used the other one. Well, then we got thinking, this is kind of silly. The people want to come, and they got to wait 2 or 3 hours, and then we haven't got that kind of time. Well, I knew Newfoundland was 42-inch gauge, the same as me. And I said to Larry one day, I said, "Why don't we fly over and see what they're doing?" I said, they're going out of the railway business. There's got to be something there. Sure enough, we went over and we drove around, and it wasn't too long. We went to Beauvoir, Larry and I, and they had an engine in there, 25 ton. They hadn't used it for a long time. Boy, oh boy, he said, they were, "Hey, we'll sell you everything." There's no junkyards in Newfoundland. Everything had to go, all the junkyard had to go to the mainland on the train. And it lost its value going across. People got rid of their car, they rolled them over in the ditch, they couldn't sell them, they couldn't get rid of them. They had a real problem there with regard to scrap. So anyway, they wanted me to buy drop center flats, and they had all kinds of, I said, no. I said, I might take a flat car. I said, we put a flat car inside I got one gone. You got one gone. Well, we'll look. They had a gun, and there was a narrow gauge gun, and it was full of ties. He says, you'll have to wait. You'll have to wait till I get it unloaded. It's the only car on the island. So at any rate, we waited, and the Bowwaters came to me and said, well, here's a badge. You walk around, do what you want. The plant's yours. You go where you want. So I thought that was kind of good. I've seen all the presses in there. A day or two, their car showed up and says, your car's here. I says, okay. And we pushed the car in with their little engine. And in there, they had a big crane. It was way up in the 3rd floor. I'll never forget this. And the doors opened up. And they could look, and it was for putting them, it was for taking these big machines up and putting them up on the 2nd floor, or what have you. So we got the station right where we wanted it, and the gondola, and the Newfie guys, they said, now you do this and I do that, and then we all go to tea. I said, well, okay. Anyway, so we did that, and they were amusing to work with. And we opened these doors up, and the wind come up, and the paper was blowing all over. But they were screaming and yelling upstairs, we can't work, we're not going to work on this and that. The guy says, just keep working, don't pay any attention to them, just get your engine on to get out of here. So we were able to load the engine, and we took it out of there, and it was good. It was all good. And we went down to the dock, and we had to transfer it into, take the wheel. The same car came to St. Thomas, but they lifted it up, and the check marked the number of the car, and they put that in my, and then there was another set of standard gauge wheels there, and put them under, and loaded it onto the car, and then they ship it back to New Brunswick, and a week later it was in St. Thomas. Now we had to unload that car, and then it had to be returned to the island. It belonged to the Newfoundland, it belonged to their island. And that car went all the way back empty to Newfoundland and went back over down. We weren't there when that took place, but it went back in its own wheels and was back in surplus. And then they sent it to the mainland, or I don't know, maybe they loaded ties in it for all I know, and they sent it back and then they loaded ties in it because that's what they were doing. At any rate, that kind of sums up with some of the defects we had on the locomotives when we were in business, some of the things we had to do, and that kind of sums it up there. It shows you all the different things that happened to us. We only very few derailments. We had a couple of little wee ones that didn't amount to anything. We were very fortunate. We had one crossing there, and it gave us an excuse to blow the whistle to go over the crossing. The people didn't like it, but it was in the rule book. There was a public crossing, and people could go over, and we wanted to blow the whistle. We had a regular 5-chime locomotive steam whistle on it, and so we tried to, with moderations, we tried to blow the whistle. It was not wide open, but it became quite novel. So the general public enjoyed it, and we had good crowds every weekend pretty much. And then I was asked to do something else, and other steam engines come along, and they asked me if I'd undertake that. They were going to send it to the scrap, and they had me go down later. It was at the paper mill. It was at the hydro plant at Nannycoat. So I kind of committed myself to go ahead and work on that, and that's when the train became up for sale, and nobody seemed to nibble on it. So the people come down that I had bought it off, and they made me an offer on it, and I accepted it. And they said all their trucks, it's as is where it is. You guys got to come and get it. And so I'll uncouple it up and pile it up for you. And I did that. I undone the track, and we got a tractor with the forks on the back, and we hucked all the ties out of the ground, and we had to clean the ground all up. So when you leave here, we don't want to see it, never know there was a steam engine here. We want that shop all cleaned up. We don't want to see a lick of any indication there was ever a train here. Well, I said, we can do that. So anyway, I did all that, but then there's a whole other story about what happened after that. I was asked to Port Stanley Terminal Rail, and I worked there and started that, and there was 5 engines there, and I run all those, and we got them in shape. But that was that was another ordeal, one ordeal right after another. Various things happened, and so we'll let it go at that for right now.
To learn more about our local history or to see a schedule of our events, please visit elginhistoricalsociety.ca.